A poor waitress calls a vampire king and says his son is unconscious on the street. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Mia was struggling to make ends meet, working long hours at a diner on the outskirts of the city. Every day felt like an uphill battle, just trying to keep food on the table for herself and her grandmother. The tips were small, the customers rarely kind, and her feet ached after every shift. But she kept going because it was all she had. One evening, after finishing yet another grueling double shift, Mia decided to take the long way home. It was a chilly night, the kind that made the streets shimmer with the glow of streetlights as raindrops fell in a steady rhythm. She wrapped her coat tighter around her, the fabric worn and threadbare, as she navigated the empty sidewalks. That's when she saw him. A boy, no more than 8 years old, crumpled against a brick wall. His skin was pale, almost unnatural, and his clothes, though finely made, were soaked through. He was unconscious, lying in the cold, with his tiny hands curled into fists. Her heart lurched in her chest. No one else was around, and the streets felt eerily quiet. She rushed over to him, checking for signs of life. His pulse was weak, but it was there. Without thinking, she pulled out her phone and dialed the number she found on a strange ring that he wore. She had no idea why she was calling it. Something about the boy seemed different. The phone rang once, twice, and then a deep, cold voice answered. Describe the child. The voice demanded, its accent thick, foreign. What do you mean? Mia stammered, confusion and panic rising in her chest. Who is this? Tell me about the boy. The voice pressed, unyielding. There was a brief silence, then a soft command. Now. Mia swallowed hard, her heart pounding in her ears. He's unconscious. He looks sick, pale. He's just lying here. He's cold. Stay with him, the voice instructed. I'm coming. Before Mia could even respond, the line went dead. Her fingers trembled as she held the phone. Who was that? And why did the voice sound so powerful? She glanced down at the boy again, her breath caught in her throat. His face was too still, his chest barely moving. She had to do something. She knelt beside him, gently brushing his hair back, and whispered to him. Stay with me, kid. Please. Her words felt empty in the cold air, but she couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more to this than a simple accident. Mia didn't know it yet, but the boy she was trying to save was no ordinary child. His father was a vampire king, and the call she had just made would change her life forever. Mia sat in the cold alley, her breath coming in shallow gasps as she stared at the unconscious boy. She couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. His skin was too pale, too cold, and despite the rain soaking through his clothes, he was burning with fever. Her heart raced as she reached for her phone again. The number from the strange call still burned in her mind. She looked down at the boy's face, her hands trembling as she pressed her finger to the screen. But before she could do anything else, a sleek black car glided into the alley, its headlights cutting through the rain like a predator on the hunt. The car came to an abrupt stop, and the door opened with a soft click. Mia froze. A tall figure stepped out, cloaked in a long black coat that fluttered in the wind. His features were sharp, his eyes an unsettling shade of amber that seemed to glow even in the dim light. Mia's breath caught in her throat. This man, this stranger, had the air of someone who didn't belong in the ordinary world. You called, the man said, his voice cold and commanding. Mia's mind raced. The voice on the phone, the one that had sounded so distant, so detached, it was his. This was the man who had answered the phone. Who are you? Mia asked, her voice barely a whisper. The man's gaze never wavered from her. It doesn't matter, he said. I'm here now. Step back. He moved past her, kneeling beside the boy with a smooth, fluid grace that made him seem almost inhuman. He reached out, his fingers brushing the boy's forehead. For a moment, Mia thought she saw his eyes flicker with something. Fear, regret, but it was gone in an instant. He turned to her, his expression unreadable. This is my son, he said simply. I need you to help him. Mia stared at him, her mind spinning. Your son. The words felt impossible to grasp. This man, This stranger with the eerie presence was the father of the boy she was trying to save? She opened her mouth to say something, but no words came out. His name is Adrian. The man continued, his voice growing softer, almost tender. He's been cursed for years. I've tried everything to wake him, but nothing works. Until you. Mia's heart pounded. She had no idea what was happening. I didn't do anything, she said, her voice cracking. I just found him. He's not even my son. The man's gaze softened for the first time. You don't need to be his mother to save him. You have something special, something that can break the curse. Mia felt a cold chill run down her spine. There was something about this man that unsettled her. His presence, the way he spoke, the way his amber eyes seemed to see through her. She was no hero, no savior. She was just a waitress, struggling to make ends meet, and now she was being asked to break a curse she didn't understand. What do you mean? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The man hesitated, his eyes flicking toward the boy. There's a bond between you and Adrian, he said, his tone almost reluctant. When you touched him, something happened. Something I can't explain. But I believe it's the only chance we have. Mia felt a wave of confusion wash over her. I don't know what you're talking about, she said, shaking her head. I just found him. I don't have any special powers. I'm not a witch, or a healer, or anything like that. The man stood up slowly, his gaze never leaving her. You don't need to be, he said quietly. But you are important. You will help him, whether you understand it or not. Mia's heart raced. This couldn't be real. How could she, a simple girl working 2 jobs, be involved in something like this? But the way the man looked at her, the way he seemed to expect her to do something, made her feel as though there was no other choice. What do you need me to do? She asked, her voice barely audible. The man's lips curved into a faint smile, though it didn't reach his eyes. Just stay with him, he said. I'll take care of the rest. Mia watched in silence as he lifted Adrian into his arms with ease, his movements so graceful they seemed almost unnatural. She didn't know what to think, didn't know how to process what was happening. But one thing was clear, her life had just changed forever, and there was no turning back. Mia followed the man, still unable to fully comprehend what was happening. She could barely keep up as he moved through the alley with the unconscious boy in his arms, his steps sure and purposeful, like he had done this 1,000 times before. Mia's mind raced, a million questions swirling around. Who was this man? Why had he come for the boy so suddenly? And why was she involved in something so strange? As they reached the car, Mia hesitated. The man opened the back door and slid inside, carefully placing Adrian on the seat next to him. Mia stood frozen by the door, unsure whether to get in or walk away. It was madness, wasn't it? Everything about this situation felt surreal. Get in, the man's voice called out softly from inside the car, his gaze meeting hers through the rearview mirror. There was something magnetic about his presence, something that drew her in despite her fear. Reluctantly, Mia climbed into the car. The interior was sleek and modern, far too luxurious for someone like her. The seats were made of soft leather, and the atmosphere was eerily calm. The only sound was the soft hum of the engine as they began to drive through the rain-soaked streets. For a while, the only thing Mia could hear was the steady rhythm of the tires against the wet pavement. The silence between them felt heavy, uncomfortable. Finally, the man broke the quiet. My name is Aldrich, he said, his voice low and steady. And this is Adrian, my son. Mia nodded slightly, unsure what to say. The name felt oddly familiar, but she couldn't place it. Aldrich glanced at her, his amber eyes piercing through the darkness. I know this is overwhelming for you, but I need you to understand something. Adrian's curse is powerful, and it has kept him in this state for years. No one has been able to wake him. No doctor, no spell, nothing has worked. Until now. Mia's heart pounded in her chest. I don't understand, she whispered. I didn't do anything. I just found him. He was just lying there on the street. Aldrich's gaze softened, though his expression remained serious. When you touched him, something happened. It's not just an accident, Mia. Mia's pulse quickened. What do you mean? What happened? You have a connection to him, Aldrich said, his voice barely audible. A bond, though you may not realize it yet. It's what kept him alive all these years. And it's what will break his curse. Mia felt a chill spread through her. A connection? A bond? How could she possibly have a connection to this strange, powerful boy? She was just a waitress, struggling to survive day by day. She didn't believe in magic or curses or anything like that. She had barely survived her own life. How could she help someone else? But, I don't have anything special, she said, her voice shaking. I'm just a regular person. I don't know how I can help him. Aldrich didn't respond immediately. He focused on the road, his face unreadable. After a long pause, he spoke again, his tone gentler. You don't need to be special, Mia. The bond you share with Adrian is more than just an accident. You were meant to find him. He's been waiting for you. Mia felt her breath catch in her throat. Waiting for her? She didn't know what to believe anymore. She had never asked for this, had never imagined her life would take such a turn. The car swerved around a corner, and they were soon on a dark road leading toward a large, imposing mansion. It looked out of place, surrounded by trees and hidden behind a tall, iron gate. Aldrich parked the car outside the gates, and Mia's heart skipped a beat. She had no idea what to expect next, but she knew that her life was about to change forever. Aldrich opened the door and stepped out of the car, his expression unreadable. He motioned for Mia to follow. She hesitated, her feet frozen in place. You don't have to be afraid, Aldrich said, turning to face her. I'll make sure you're safe. You don't have to understand everything right now, but trust me. Adrian needs you. Mia swallowed hard, trying to steady her nerves. She had come this far, hadn't she? She couldn't back out now. Taking a deep breath, she stepped out of the car and followed him toward the mansion. The heavy doors of the mansion opened with a soft creak, revealing a dimly lit foyer. A tall chandelier hung from the ceiling, casting eerie shadows across the marble floors. Aldrich led her through the grand hallway, past towering portraits and antique furniture. Mia felt like she was walking through a dream or a nightmare. She didn't know which. They reached a large room at the end of the hall, where Adrian lay on a grand bed, his features still as death. Aldrich paused at the door, his gaze softening for just a moment before he spoke again. This is where you come in, Mia. You're the key to saving him. Mia's heart pounded. The weight of his words pressed down on her chest like a physical force. What had she gotten herself into? Mia stood at the entrance of the grand room, her heart racing in her chest. Adrian lay motionless on the bed, his delicate features still, as though he were asleep. Yet there was something unnerving about the silence that filled the room. She had never seen a child so lifeless, and the sight of him only deepened her fear. Aldrich stood beside her, his presence imposing, yet his gaze softened as he watched the boy. You can do this, he said, his voice surprisingly gentle. Mia swallowed, trying to steady her nerves. She could hardly comprehend what was happening. 1 minute, she was working a regular shift at a diner, and now she was standing in a mansion, facing a mysterious vampire king and his son, a boy who seemed to be cursed by forces beyond her understanding. How can I help him? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Aldrich turned to face her, his amber eyes locking with hers. You've already done more than you realize. Your touch, your presence, is the key to breaking the curse. Mia felt a cold shiver run down her spine. I don't understand. I'm just a waitress. I have no special powers. Aldrich's lips curved into a faint smile, though it didn't reach his eyes. You don't need special powers. You're here for a reason, Mia. Adrian has been in this state for years. His mother, my late wife, placed a powerful enchantment on him to protect him from the dangers of the vampire world. But now, the time has come to break the curse. Mia's head spun. She had barely come to terms with the fact that vampires were real, and now she was being told that her touch had somehow triggered something that could change the fate of a child, a vampire prince. What exactly do I need to do? She asked, her voice trembling. Aldrich stepped closer to her, his eyes never leaving hers. You need to bond with him. The connection between you two must be solidified, or the curse will never lift. Only then will Adrian be able to awaken from his slumber. Mia's stomach churned. Bond with him? She barely knew the boy. How could she possibly form a bond with someone she had just met? But Aldrich seemed so sure, and his intensity left no room for doubt. He believed in this, believed that she was the answer. How do I do that? She asked quietly. Hold his hand, Aldrich instructed. Touch him as you did before, but this time, don't let go. Let your emotions flow, let the connection happen naturally. The curse is powerful, but your bond will be stronger. Mia hesitated for a moment before she approached the bed. Adrian's still form lay before her, his skin cold to the touch. With a deep breath, she reached out, and gently grasped his hand. The moment her fingers brushed against his, she felt a surge of warmth course through her, as if the boy's very soul was reaching out to her. She closed her eyes, trying to calm her racing heart. For a brief moment, she felt a connection, a strange, almost overwhelming feeling. It was as though she could hear a whispering voice in her mind, calling to her, guiding her. "It's working," Aldrich murmured from behind her. Mia's eyes shot open, and she looked down at Adrian. His chest, which had been still moments before, rose and fell ever so slightly. "What's happening?" she asked, her voice filled with awe and fear. Aldrich's expression softened, his usual stoicism replaced by a faint glimmer of hope. "The curse is weakening," he explained. "But it's not over. You need to stay connected, Mia. Don't pull away." Mia nodded, her grip tightening around Adrian's hand. She could feel the warmth growing, spreading through her body, filling her with an energy she couldn't explain. It was as if the boy's soul was slowly waking up, and she was the bridge that connected him to the world. She had no idea what she was doing, but she couldn't stop now. "Keep going," Aldrich urged, his voice quiet but insistent. "You're doing fine." Time seemed to slow as Mia focused all her energy on the boy. The room was silent except for the soft sound of Adrian's breathing, which was growing stronger with each passing second. Mia's mind began to drift, and she felt a strange sensation, as though she were falling into a deep sleep, yet she couldn't tear her eyes away from Adrian. Then, suddenly, she felt it. A pulse, faint at first, but unmistakable. The boy's fingers twitched in her hand, and his eyes fluttered open. Mia gasped, pulling back slightly, but Adrian's grip on her hand tightened. His amber eyes, the same as his father's, locked onto hers. "You did it," Aldrich whispered. Mia stared at the boy, her heart racing. Adrian's gaze was intense, his lips moving as if trying to say something. But all he managed was a soft, hoarse whisper. "Mom." Mia's breath caught in her throat. The boy's voice was barely audible, but the pain in his eyes was unmistakable. Adrian's awakening had come at a price, and Mia realized, for the first time, just how much was at stake. Mia stood frozen as Adrian's eyes fluttered open, his gaze locking onto hers. The connection between them felt intense, as if something deep within the boy was stirring. His voice, though weak, barely a whisper, echoed in her mind. "Mom." The single word carried more weight than anything she had ever heard. She couldn't explain it, but the sound of that word felt like a bond, an invisible thread tying her to this strange boy she had just met. Her heart raced, and for a moment, she wasn't sure what to do. "Adrian," she whispered, her voice shaking. The boy's grip tightened on her hand, and his amber eyes grew more focused, though still filled with confusion and exhaustion. Aldrich, who had been silently observing from behind her, stepped forward, his presence commanding. "It's all right, son," Aldrich said gently, his tone softer than Mia had ever heard. "You're safe now." Adrian's eyes darted to his father, then back to Mia, his face showing traces of fear. "Who are you?" Adrian's voice was hoarse, the words barely audible, but there was something desperate in his expression. Mia felt a rush of emotion, her protective instinct kicking in. I'm Mia. I found you on the street," she explained, her voice soft but steady. "You were unconscious, and I helped." Adrian's brow furrowed slightly, as if trying to understand. "But you're not my mother," he murmured, the confusion in his voice palpable. Aldrich's face darkened, his eyes flickering with something Mia couldn't quite place. "No, he's not your mother, Adrian. But she saved you," Aldrich replied, his voice firm but not unkind. The tension in the room thickened as Adrian seemed to process his father's words. "Why am I awake?" he asked, his voice barely more than a whisper. Mia's heart ached for him. How much had he suffered in his sleep, in that cursed state? She couldn't imagine being trapped in such a condition for so long, unable to wake up, to feel the world around him. "You woke up because of her," Aldrich said, turning his gaze to Mia. "Because of the bond between you two." Adrian's eyes shifted back to Mia, the intensity of his gaze making her nervous. "I don't understand," Adrian whispered. "What bond? Why did you help me?" Mia's breath caught in her throat. She had no answers for him, no explanations that made sense. She was just a girl trying to survive, trying to make a living, and yet here she was, at the heart of something so much bigger than herself. I don't know, Mia admitted, shaking her head. I saw you there. I couldn't just leave you. You were in trouble, and I couldn't walk away. Adrian blinked slowly, processing her words. There was a flicker of something in his eyes. Understanding, perhaps, or at least the beginning of it. Thank you, he said softly, his voice still shaky. Mia's heart warmed at the gratitude in his tone. She had never expected this moment, never expected that something so small, like reaching out to help a child, could lead her into this strange world of vampires and curses. Aldrich stepped forward, his eyes never leaving Mia. You've done more than you realize, Mia, he said, his voice low but sincere. The bond you share with Adrian is not just a coincidence. There is a connection between you, something that has been waiting for years to be awakened. Mia's head spun. What do you mean? I'm just a waitress. There's nothing special about me. Aldrich's eyes softened, and for the first time, Mia saw a hint of vulnerability in them. Sometimes, the world has a way of bringing the right people together, he said quietly. You were meant to find Adrian, just as he was meant to find you. There is power in that bond, Mia. Power that can protect him and save him from the dangers that lie ahead. Adrian shifted in the bed, his gaze flickering between his father and Mia. What dangers? He asked, his voice barely more than a whisper. Aldrich's face hardened, and Mia saw the weight of the world in his eyes. There are forces in this world that want to control you, Adrian, he said, his voice grim. People who will stop at nothing to use your power for their own gain. Adrian's face twisted with fear, and Mia instinctively reached out to him, her hand brushing his. You're safe now, she said softly, her voice steady despite the fear that was creeping into her own heart. We'll protect you. Adrian nodded slowly, but Mia could see the uncertainty in his eyes. He had just awakened from a long, dark sleep, and now he was thrust into a world full of danger, uncertainty, and unknowns. But Mia had made a promise to him, and she wasn't going to break it. As the room fell silent, Mia couldn't help but wonder what the future held for her and Adrian. She had already crossed a line she couldn't uncross, and the world she had entered was far darker and more dangerous than she had ever imagined. But one thing was certain, she was not going to let this boy face it alone. Mia stood in the dimly lit room, her thoughts racing as she stared at Adrian. His gaze was full of confusion and unease, and she could see the fear flickering in his amber eyes. He was awake now, but his world had been turned upside down, and Mia couldn't help but feel the weight of that responsibility. He had been asleep for so long, trapped in a curse, and now he was thrust into a reality full of danger and unknowns. Her hand still held his, offering him a sense of comfort, but she wasn't sure she had the strength to comfort herself, let alone him. Aldrich watched them both, his face a mask of calm that barely hid the storm beneath. What happens now? Mia asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Now, we protect him, Aldrich replied, his tone firm. There are forces at work, people who will want Adrian for his power. Mia's heart skipped a beat at the mention of danger. She had never imagined that helping a child could bring so much risk. Who would want him? She asked, trying to keep her voice steady. Aldrich's eyes darkened. The vampire world is not as simple as it seems. There are factions, rivals, and enemies that would stop at nothing to use Adrian's power for their own gain. His curse was meant to protect him from those who would exploit him. But now that he's awake, we must be vigilant. Mia nodded, though she didn't fully understand what was happening. All she knew was that she couldn't let anything happen to Adrian. She couldn't stand the thought of him being hurt again. How do we keep him safe? She asked. Aldrich's gaze softened for a moment before he spoke. We stay hidden. We go somewhere secure, somewhere no one can find us. But most importantly, we cannot let anyone know that Adrian is awake. His awakening must remain a secret. If the wrong people find out, it could cost us everything. Adrian shifted on the bed, his eyes now more alert, though still clouded with uncertainty. I don't understand, he murmured, his voice weak. Why is everyone so scared? I'm just me. Aldrich stepped closer to him, crouching down beside the bed. Adrian, he said gently, you are more than just you. You are the heir to a kingdom that people would do anything to control. Your bloodline is powerful, and there are those who would use that power to take what belongs to them. Adrian's eyes widened in confusion and fear. A kingdom, he whispered. But I don't remember anything. I don't remember who I am. Mia squeezed his hand tighter, trying to offer him some reassurance, even though she wasn't sure how to comfort him. "You're not alone," she said softly. "You have your father, and you have me." Adrian looked at her, his eyes searching hers as if trying to make sense of the words. "Why are you helping me?" he asked, his voice barely audible. Mia hesitated for a moment, but then she spoke the truth. "Because you needed help, and I couldn't just leave you there." She could see the hesitation in his eyes, the doubt that still lingered in his mind. He didn't fully trust her, and she understood why. They had just met, and yet here she was, caught in the middle of a strange and dangerous world that she never asked to be part of. But she was here now, and she wasn't going to leave him. Aldrich stood up straight, his eyes flicking to Mia. "We don't have much time," he said, his voice low. "The sooner we leave, the safer we'll be. But we can't move recklessly. We need a plan." "Where will we go?" Mia asked. "Where can we hide?" Aldrich's eyes met hers, and for the first time, she saw a flicker of something human in his expression. Concern, perhaps, or even fear. "There's a place," he said slowly. "A sanctuary where we can hide. But it's not safe for long. We need to move quickly, and we need to stay under the radar. The vampire world is always watching." Mia swallowed hard, the weight of Aldrich's words sinking in. The fear was real, and so was the danger. She didn't know what the future held, but she knew that she had made a promise to Adrian. She would keep him safe, no matter what. "Let's go," she said, her voice steady despite the anxiety that threatened to overwhelm her. "I'm ready." Aldrich nodded, a slight hint of approval in his expression. "Stay close, and don't trust anyone outside this room. The road ahead will be difficult, but you've already shown you have the courage to face it." Adrian slowly sat up, his eyes still filled with confusion, but there was a new determination there as well. He looked at Mia, and for the first time since he had awakened, he smiled, albeit faintly. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice full of gratitude. Mia smiled back, though the fear in her heart didn't ease. There was so much more ahead of them, and she had no idea what dangers they would face. But she had made a promise, and she intended to keep it. They had to move fast, and they had to be smart. Because the forces that were after Adrian were not just coming for him. They were coming for all of them. Mia, Aldrich, and Adrian made their way through the mansion, the air heavy with unspoken words and tension. Every step they took seemed to echo in the grand hallway, the ancient stone floors creaking underfoot as if the house itself was alive and watching. Adrian walked between them, his small hand clutching Mia's, his face a mixture of confusion and uncertainty. Mia couldn't help but feel protective of him, though she had no idea what was really going on. She had no answers, no plan. Only a sense of urgency and the feeling that everything was spiraling out of control. Aldrich led the way, his posture rigid, his eyes constantly scanning the surroundings, as if expecting someone, or something, to appear at any moment. Mia glanced at him, noting the tension in his face, the way his jaw clenched whenever he turned a corner, as if he were bracing for danger. They reached a small, hidden door at the back of the mansion, and Aldrich opened it without hesitation. The room beyond was dimly lit, with old furniture draped in sheets and dust covering everything. It looked like a storage room, and used for years. Aldrich stepped inside, motioning for them to follow. "We need to stay here for now," he said, his voice low and steady. "It's the safest place in the house." Mia nodded, her heart racing. She was starting to feel the weight of everything happening around her. Adrian had been trapped in a curse for so long, and now that he was awake, he was in danger. And she, just an ordinary woman, was caught in the middle of all of this. She didn't understand any of it. She didn't know why the boy's touch had awakened something in her, something that felt like a deep connection, but there was no time to question it now. They needed to keep moving. "What now?" Mia asked, her voice shaky. Aldrich turned to face her, his amber eyes meeting hers with an intensity that made her stomach tighten. "We wait," he said simply. "And we prepare." "Prepare for what?" she asked, feeling a growing sense of dread. Aldrich didn't answer immediately. Instead, he turned to Adrian, who was standing quietly beside Mia, his eyes wide and filled with curiosity. "Adrian," Aldrich said, his voice softer now, "there are people who will come for you. People who want to use your power. We have to be ready for them." Adrian nodded slowly, his face pale but determined. "I don't understand. Why me? Why do they want me?" Aldrich sighed, the weight of years of responsibility heavy in his gaze. "Because you're not just any boy," he said, his voice tinged with both pride and sorrow. "You're the heir to the vampire throne. You have powers that no one else possesses." Adrian looked up at him, confusion still clouding his expression. "Powers?" he asked, his voice small and uncertain. "I don't even know who I am." Aldrich placed a hand on Adrian's shoulder, his grip firm but comforting. "You will understand soon enough," he said. "But right now, we need to focus on keeping you safe." Mia watched the exchange between father and son, feeling a growing sense of urgency. She had promised to help Adrian, but the more she learned, the less she understood. Vampires. Power. A hidden kingdom. It was all so much to take in, and the weight of it pressed down on her chest like a heavy stone. "What happens if they find us?" Mia asked, her voice tight. Aldrich's gaze darkened. "If they find us, they will stop at nothing to take Adrian. The vampire world is ruthless, and there are those who will do anything to seize control." Mia swallowed hard, the gravity of his words sinking in. "How will we escape?" Aldrich's eyes met hers again, and for the first time, she saw a flicker of vulnerability in them. "We don't escape," he said, his voice firm. "We fight." Mia's heart skipped a beat. "Fight?" she repeated, her voice cracking. "What do you mean, fight? I'm just a regular person. I don't know anything about fighting vampires, or whatever this world is." Aldrich's expression softened slightly. "You're not just a regular person, Mia," he said. "You've already proven that. You saved Adrian. And now you're part of this world whether you like it or not." Mia's mind raced, the weight of Aldrich's words sinking in. She had never asked for any of this. She had never wanted to be involved in a world so dangerous, so full of darkness. But Adrian needed her. And somehow, despite the fear gnawing at her, she couldn't bring herself to walk away. "I don't know how to fight," Mia said quietly, her voice barely audible. "But I'll do whatever it takes to protect him." Aldrich nodded, a faint smile touching his lips. "I know you will." The room fell into a tense silence as they all stood there, the reality of their situation settling in. Mia felt the weight of responsibility pressing down on her more than ever. Adrian was awake, but the battle for his safety had only just begun. And she had no idea what dangers lay ahead, but she knew one thing for sure. She was in this now. No turning back. The fight for Adrian's life had already begun, and Mia was determined to protect him, no matter what. Mia sat quietly in the dim room, her mind swirling with the weight of everything that had happened. Adrian was still beside her, his eyes flickering with uncertainty, as though he was still trying to make sense of the world he had woken up to. Aldrich stood at the far side of the room, his posture rigid, eyes scanning the shadows outside the window. It was clear that they were in a race against time, but how could they possibly prepare for a fight when Mia barely understood the world they were in? Adrian shifted beside her, his voice breaking the silence. "What if I'm not ready? What if I can't do what they want?" Mia turned to him, her heart aching at the fear in his voice. She placed her hand on his, offering a reassuring squeeze. "You don't have to do anything alone," she said softly. "We'll figure this out together." Adrian looked up at her, his eyes searching hers, and for a brief moment, there was a flicker of trust, something that wasn't there before. Aldrich's voice broke through the moment. "This isn't about being ready, Adrian," he said, his tone steady but heavy with meaning. "This is about survival. Your enemies won't wait for you to be ready. They won't show mercy." The words were harsh, but Mia could sense the truth in them. The vampire world they had entered was not a forgiving one. Aldrich turned away from the window, his gaze fixed on the two of them. "We need to move quickly. The longer we stay here, the more chance we give our enemies to find us. We're not safe." Mia's chest tightened at the thought. It seemed like the danger was never ending, and she had no idea how to navigate it. She wasn't trained for this. She wasn't a fighter. She was just a woman who had found a boy in need, and now, she was his protector. "Where do we go?" Mia asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Aldrich's eyes hardened, and for a moment, she saw the weight of centuries of experience in his gaze. "There's a place, deep in the mountains, where no one can reach us. But getting there won't be easy. We'll have to move undercover, and we can't afford any mistakes." Mia's stomach turned at the thought. The unknowns were suffocating, and the stakes were higher than she had ever imagined. But she had no choice. She had made a promise to protect Adrian. And no matter how daunting the road ahead seemed, She wasn't going to back down now. How do we get there? She asked, determination creeping into her voice. We'll leave tonight, Aldrich replied. Under the cover of darkness. We have to stay off the radar, keep a low profile. No one can know Adrian is awake. Adrian's eyes widened. But why? Why is it so important for them to not know I'm awake? Aldrich's expression grew darker, and for a moment, the room seemed to grow colder. Because if they know, they'll come for you, he said quietly. They'll come for you, and they won't stop until they have you. The gravity of his words sank in, and Mia's heart began to race. She could feel Adrian's hand trembling in hers, the fear palpable between them. This was real. This was dangerous. And there was no turning back now. Aldrich continued, his voice hardening with resolve. Your bloodline is powerful, Adrian. You're the key to everything. There are vampire lords, ancient families who have waited centuries for you to awaken. They'll do anything to control you, to control your power. Mia glanced at Adrian, his face pale. With fear, and her protective instincts surged. She wasn't going to let anyone take him. She wouldn't let anyone use him for their own gain. I'll keep you safe, she whispered to Adrian, her voice steady despite the fear clawing at her own chest. We'll get through this together. Adrian nodded, his hand squeezing hers. I don't want to hurt anyone, he said softly, his voice barely a whisper. I just want to be normal. Mia's heart broke for him. He was just a boy, thrust into a world that was far too dangerous for someone his age. But Mia knew she couldn't offer him a normal life. Not anymore. You'll never be alone, she promised, her voice fierce. We'll fight together, and we'll protect you. No one will hurt you. Adrian's eyes filled with a quiet gratitude, though his fear was still clear. Thank you, he said softly. Aldrich stepped forward, his eyes locking with Mia's, his gaze softening for the briefest of moments. You've done more for him than you know, he said quietly. But this is only the beginning. The road ahead will be difficult. There will be more challenges, more dangers. But if you stand by him, if you stay strong, there's a chance. Mia took a deep breath, the weight of the responsibility pressing down on her shoulders. But she couldn't show weakness now. She couldn't let Adrian see how scared she was. We'll stay strong, she said, her voice unwavering. We'll face whatever comes together. Aldrich nodded once, his expression hardening again. Then let's move. The sooner we leave, the better. As they prepared to leave the mansion, Mia couldn't help but feel the weight of the world on her shoulders. She had no idea what awaited them, but one thing was certain. She wasn't going to let anyone take Adrian. Not without a fight. Mia, Adrian, and Aldrich set out under the cover of night, the mansion's towering walls soon disappearing behind them as they made their way through the dense forest that surrounded it. The trees were tall and thick, their branches swaying gently in the wind, but the air felt charged, heavy with the tension that had been building ever since Adrian's awakening. Mia walked with Adrian close by her side, her hand holding his tightly, while Aldrich led the way, his eyes sharp and alert, scanning every shadow for danger. The forest seemed eerily quiet, and Mia couldn't help but feel like they were being watched, though the darkness offered little comfort. Every step they took felt like a small risk, as though the world around them was a ticking time bomb waiting to explode. Do you think they know where we are? Mia asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Aldrich didn't immediately respond. He continued moving forward, his pace steady and unwavering. After a moment, he finally spoke, his voice low and steady, though tinged with a hint of caution. They will eventually. The vampire world has eyes everywhere, but we're not going to make it easy for them. Mia's heart raced at his words. She had no idea what she was really getting into. All she knew was that Adrian needed her, and she couldn't abandon him now. What happens if they catch us? She asked, though she already feared she knew the answer. Aldrich glanced back at her, his amber eyes gleaming in the low light. If they catch us, they'll take Adrian. They'll use him, control him, and make him a pawn in their games. We can't let that happen. Mia's stomach churned at the thought. She couldn't bear to think of Adrian being used, being controlled like that. She had seen the fear in his eyes when he first woke up, the confusion, the uncertainty. He was just a boy who had been trapped for so long, and now, all of that danger was being thrust upon him again. She looked down at him, her grip tightening on his hand. We won't let that happen, she promised, her voice steady. Adrian looked up at her, his face pale and drawn, but his eyes, Those amber eyes, so much like his father's, held a quiet trust. "I don't want to hurt anyone," he whispered, his voice filled with a sadness that broke Mia's heart. "I never asked for any of this." Mia's chest tightened, and she bent down, gently brushing his hair away from his forehead. "I know," she said softly, "but you don't have to do this alone. We'll protect you. You're not a weapon. You're just you." Adrian didn't say anything, but the small, grateful smile that tugged at the corners of his lips was enough to make Mia's heart swell with a mixture of hope and fear. She wasn't sure what the future held, but she knew that she had made a promise to protect him, to keep him safe. The silence between them was only broken by the soft rustling of leaves and the distant hoot of an owl. They walked for what felt like hours, moving cautiously, each step bringing them farther away from the mansion and deeper into the forest. Mia's legs began to ache, and she could feel the weight of exhaustion pressing down on her. But she refused to stop. She had no choice but to keep moving. After what felt like an eternity, Aldrich stopped suddenly, his hand raised in a silent signal for them to be still. Mia froze, her heart pounding in her chest. "What is it?" she whispered. Aldrich's eyes narrowed as he scanned the darkness around them. "Someone's here," he said quietly, his voice low and filled with tension. Mia's breath hitched, and she instinctively pulled Adrian closer, her protective instincts kicking in. "Who?" she whispered urgently. Aldrich didn't answer immediately. He was too focused on the sounds around them, listening intently. Then, just as the tension seemed unbearable, a figure appeared in the distance, a silhouette in the darkness. Mia's heart raced, her fear rising, but Aldrich didn't seem alarmed. In fact, he took a step forward, his posture still commanding but not aggressive. "It's him," Aldrich murmured. "Stay back, Mia." Mia's eyes widened as the figure stepped closer, revealing a tall, broad-shouldered man with long dark hair and piercing eyes. He wore a cloak, his movements smooth and controlled. Mia couldn't tell if he was a threat or an ally, but the intensity in his eyes made her instinctively reach for the knife Aldrich had given her earlier. The man stopped several feet away from them, his gaze fixed on Adrian. "Aldrich," the man said, his voice deep and gravelly. "I should have known you'd be here." Aldrich's expression remained unreadable, though Mia noticed the faintest flicker of recognition in his eyes. "Vorian," Aldrich said, his tone cold. "What do you want?" The man, Vorian, stepped forward, his gaze now shifting to Mia. "I'm not here to cause trouble," he said, his voice surprisingly calm. "I've come to warn you." Mia's grip on Adrian tightened. "Warn us about what?" she asked, her voice sharp with suspicion. Vorian's eyes flickered with something that could have been pity, but it was gone as quickly as it came. "There are those looking for him," Vorian said, nodding toward Adrian. "You won't be safe out here much longer. The hunt has begun." Aldrich's expression hardened, and Mia felt the weight of the words settle over her like a heavy blanket. The hunt had begun. The danger was real, and it was closing in on them faster than she could have ever imagined. Mia stood frozen, her heart racing as Vorian's words hung in the air like a heavy fog. The hunt had begun. The danger was real, and it was closing in faster than she could grasp. Adrian, standing beside her, looked equally shaken, his face pale as he clutched her hand tighter, as though he feared being pulled away at any moment. Aldrich, ever the composed figure, did not react at first, his gaze sharp as he studied Vorian. Why would they start now? Aldrich's voice was calm, but Mia could hear the tension beneath it. Vorian's eyes flickered, a slight unease creeping into his expression, but he quickly regained his composure. "Because they know he's awake. The balance has shifted," he said, his voice low and serious. "You cannot hide him for long. The more you try, the harder they will come." Mia felt the weight of his words pressing down on her chest. The hunt. That was all it took. Adrian had awakened, and now they were all targets. "How much time do we have?" Mia asked, her voice trembling, though she tried to keep it steady for Adrian. Vorian glanced around them, his eyes scanning the trees, the darkness closing in. "Hours, maybe less," he said bluntly. "They will move fast, and they will not stop until they have him. You're not safe out here." The tension was palpable, and Mia's thoughts raced. She had no idea where they could hide that would be safe from the vampire world's reach. She had never been a fighter, and now she was supposed to protect Adrian from the entire vampire kingdom? "What do we do now?" Mia asked, her voice barely a whisper. Aldrich finally spoke, his voice cutting through the uncertainty. "We go to the sanctuary," he said, his words leaving little room for argument. "It's the only place they won't find us immediately." Mia turned to him, her mind still reeling. "But if they're already looking for us, how do we even get there?" Aldrich's expression was hard, his gaze unwavering. "We move fast, stay in the shadows. We can't afford to make a single mistake." Mia nodded, feeling the enormity of their situation pressed down on her like a weight. She had to protect Adrian, no matter what. "Are we ready?" Aldrich asked, looking at them both. Mia glanced at Adrian, his face full of fear, but there was something else too, something that spoke of trust, of the bond that had formed between them, however uncertain it was. She squeezed his hand. "We're ready," she said, her voice steady despite the fear in her chest. Vorian stepped aside, allowing them to move forward. "Stay close," he warned, his voice low. "If you're spotted, it's over. They won't give you a second chance." Mia's heart was in her throat as they began walking again, the weight of Vorian's words hanging over them like a dark cloud. The forest around them felt too still, too quiet. Every rustle of leaves seemed amplified, every footstep a betrayal. The further they moved, the more Mia's anxiety grew. Her thoughts kept returning to Adrian. He was just a boy. She couldn't fathom the weight of what he had already been through. He had been cursed, trapped for so long, and now that he was free, he was once again running for his life. The boy she had met just days ago was not just any child. He was a prince, the heir to a powerful vampire kingdom, and now the entire vampire world wanted him. She couldn't allow them to have him. She wouldn't let them take him. After what felt like hours, they reached a small clearing, where Aldrich halted abruptly. "This is as far as we go for now," he said, his voice quiet but urgent. "We need to rest, but we won't stay here long." Mia nodded, grateful for the brief reprieve, but her mind was already racing ahead. How long before they were discovered? How long could they keep running? Aldrich knelt beside a large rock, pulling out a small map from inside his cloak. "There's a hidden passage not far from here. It'll lead us to the sanctuary," he said, his eyes scanning the map quickly. "But we need to be careful. There are watchmen along the way. We can't be seen." Mia's pulse quickened as she watched Aldrich trace the path on the map with his finger. "We can't take too long," she said, her voice sharp with urgency. Aldrich nodded, folding the map carefully and tucking it away. "We won't," he assured her. "We'll move quickly and quietly. Just stay close." They continued through the forest, moving with purpose, the weight of the hunt hanging over them. The trees seemed to close in around them as they reached the hidden passage, a narrow path that barely seemed wide enough for them to squeeze through. Mia hesitated for a moment, her breath coming in shallow gasps, but Adrian tugged at her hand, his small voice barely audible. "We're going to be okay, right?" His words were innocent, full of that same trust she had seen in his eyes before. Mia crouched down beside him, her heart aching for the pain he had already endured. "Yes, we're going to be okay," she whispered, though she wasn't sure if she was telling him the truth or just trying to convince herself. The path ahead was uncertain, but there was no turning back. They had already crossed a line, and now there was no going back. With a deep breath, Mia followed Aldrich and Adrian into the narrow passage, the heavy darkness surrounding them as they moved deeper into the unknown. Mia, Aldrich, and Adrian moved swiftly through the narrow passage, their footsteps muffled by the thick layers of dirt and leaves beneath them. The darkness enveloped them, the only sounds their breathing and the distant rustling of the forest around them. Mia's heart pounded in her chest, a constant reminder of the danger that was only growing closer. Every moment felt like a countdown, the fear of being discovered gnawing at her. Adrian walked close by her side, his small hand gripping hers tightly, though Mia could feel the tremor in his fingers. She knew he was scared, though he didn't say anything. It was clear in his eyes, the uncertainty that clouded his gaze. He had been through so much already, and now, he was being forced to run again. Mia glanced at Aldrich ahead of them. His pace was steady, purposeful, as if this was nothing new to him. He moved through the shadows like a ghost, his every step calculated, cautious. Mia couldn't help but admire his composure, but a part of her wondered how much of that was a mask, a facade he had built over the centuries. What was going through his mind now, as his son walked beside them, so vulnerable, so exposed? How much further? Mia asked, her voice breaking the silence. Aldrich didn't look back as he answered, his voice low but clear. Not far. We'll reach the shelter soon. Mia nodded, but the words barely reassured her. She had no idea what this shelter was or what awaited them when they got there. For all she knew, they might not make it there before someone discovered them. The path wound deeper into the forest, the trees growing thicker around them, their branches interlocking like a canopy of shadows. Mia felt the temperature drop, the chill of the night seeping into her skin, but it wasn't the cold that made her shiver. It was the knowledge that they were being hunted. They were not just running for safety, they were running for their lives. Adrian squeezed her hand tighter, and Mia glanced down at him, offering a small, reassuring smile. We're going to be okay, she whispered, though she wasn't sure if she was trying to comfort him or herself. Adrian met her gaze, his eyes full of quiet trust, and for a moment, Mia saw a flicker of hope in them. He didn't say anything, but the look he gave her spoke volumes. He was still a child, thrust into a world he didn't understand, a world that wanted to use him, control him. And yet, despite everything, he had placed his trust in her. Stay close, Aldrich said suddenly, his voice sharp as he slowed his pace. Mia's heart leapt into her throat. She had been so focused on Adrian, she hadn't noticed the change in the air. Aldrich had sensed something, someone, approaching. The hairs on the back of her neck stood on end, and for the first time, she felt like the world around them wasn't just silent. It was watching. What is it? Mia asked, her voice barely a whisper, as if speaking louder would alert whoever was out there. Aldrich's amber eyes narrowed as he surveyed their surroundings, his body tense. I'm not sure, but we're not taking chances. He motioned for them to stop, stepping forward with a fluidity that was almost inhuman. Mia held her breath, her heart thudding in her ears as she watched Aldrich move silently through the darkness, his every motion calculated. Adrian pressed close to her side, his face pale, but his eyes alert. Mia couldn't help but feel the weight of the situation settling in. They were being hunted, and it was only a matter of time before they were found. Is it safe to keep moving? Mia whispered, her voice trembling slightly. Aldrich paused for a moment, listening. Then, with a sharp nod, he gestured for them to follow. For now, stay close. Move quickly. They continued their journey, but Mia could feel the tension in the air, thick and suffocating. Every rustle in the trees, every shifting shadow, made her jump, her heart pounding harder with each step. She kept her eyes fixed on Aldrich, knowing that he was their only chance to survive, and yet, a small part of her couldn't shake the feeling that even he wasn't invincible. Time seemed to stretch as they moved deeper into the forest. Mia had lost all sense of direction. She didn't know where they were going or how much further they had to go, but she trusted Aldrich. He knew this world. He knew how to survive. But Adrian was different. He didn't belong in this world. And yet, he was the reason they were all running. Mia looked at the boy beside her. Despite his fear, despite everything he had been through, he still trusted her. She could see it in his eyes, that glimmer of hope, fragile but strong. She wasn't going to let him down. They had to make it through this. They had to survive. The path opened into a small clearing, and Aldrich stopped abruptly, raising his hand to signal for them to halt. Mia held her breath, her mind racing. What was it now? Had they been spotted? Aldrich motioned for them to stay silent, and began to move toward a large, moss-covered rock at the edge of the clearing. He crouched down behind it, beckoning them to follow. Mia and Adrian quickly moved into position behind the rock, their movements swift and quiet. The air around them seemed to hold its breath. Aldrich's gaze was fixed on something in the distance, and Mia followed his line of sight. She couldn't see anything, but she felt it. Someone was coming. Someone was close. Mia's breath caught in her throat as the tension in the air grew unbearable. She crouched behind the moss-covered rock, eyes wide, scanning the clearing. Aldrich was still motionless beside her, his gaze fixed on something far in the distance. Adrian was pressed close to her side, his hand trembling in hers, his small body stiff with fear. Mia squeezed his hand gently, trying to offer him some comfort, but her own heart was racing. The forest around them felt impossibly still, and the longer they waited, the more she could feel the danger closing in. Aldrich's eyes narrowed as he focused on the shadows at the edge of the clearing. Mia followed his gaze, but the darkness was thick, obscuring whatever might be lurking there. She held her breath, straining to hear the slightest sound, but there was nothing. No rustling of leaves, no snap of a twig underfoot, just the deafening silence. After what felt like an eternity, Aldrich finally spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. "They're close," he said, his tone hard, filled with a quiet urgency. Mia felt a cold shiver run down her spine. Who was it? Who was coming for them? Aldrich motioned for them to stay low, his voice soft but commanding. "When I say move, you run. Don't stop until you're inside the shelter." Mia nodded, adrenaline surging through her. She was ready. She had no other choice but to trust Aldrich, but a small part of her couldn't shake the fear that something had already gone wrong. The footsteps she had been waiting for finally came, soft and measured, like someone who knew how to move silently through the forest. Mia's heartbeat quickened as the shadowy figure emerged into view. It was a man, tall, with a dark cloak billowing behind him. His movements were slow, deliberate, as if he was searching for something or someone. Mia couldn't see his face clearly, but the presence was chilling, like a predator stalking its prey. She could feel the air around them shift, as if the very trees themselves were holding their breath. "Do you think they know we're here?" Mia whispered, barely daring to speak. Aldrich's lips pressed into a thin line. "They will soon," he said grimly. "But we're not making it easy for them." The man paused in the clearing, his posture tense as though he could sense something was wrong. He scanned the area, his eyes narrowing, but he didn't move closer. Mia's pulse raced as she tried to stay as still as possible, her every muscle tense with fear. They had to stay hidden. They couldn't afford to be seen. Adrian's grip on her hand tightened, and she could feel the trembling in his fingers. He was scared. She couldn't blame him. They were all scared. The figure took another step forward, his eyes now sweeping the area where Mia and Aldrich had been crouched moments before. Mia's heart skipped a beat. He was close. Too close. The figure inhaled sharply, as if he had caught a scent in the air. For a brief moment, Mia was sure he had seen them. Her stomach dropped. But then, to her relief, he turned and started walking in the opposite direction. Mia exhaled shakily, her body trembling with the sudden release of tension. "Not yet," Aldrich whispered, his voice low but urgent. "Stay down." The man moved further into the forest, his form disappearing into the shadows. Mia waited, counting the seconds as they passed, feeling as though the world had come to a standstill. Finally, when the man was far enough away, Aldrich motioned for them to move. "Now," he said sharply. Without hesitation, Mia pulled Adrian to his feet and ran, her legs aching as she sprinted through the underbrush, her heart pounding in her chest. She could hear Aldrich's footsteps behind them, steady and quick, but she didn't dare look back. All that mattered was getting to safety. The forest seemed endless, the path unfamiliar and winding. Mia's breath came in ragged gasps as they pushed forward, her mind a blur of fear and determination. Adrian was still beside her, his hand gripped tightly in hers, but she could feel the weight of his fear pressing down on her. "We're almost there," Aldrich called from behind them, his voice cutting through the dark. Mia pushed herself harder, forcing her legs to move faster, even as the exhaustion threatened to overtake her. She couldn't stop. They couldn't stop. "How much longer?" she called back, though she wasn't sure if it was more for herself or for Adrian. Aldrich's voice was steady, though there was an urgency to it now. "Just a little further. Keep going." They ran for what felt like miles, the trees around them blurring together, until finally, the dense forest began to thin out, and Mia saw a faint light ahead. Her heart skipped a beat. Was it the shelter? Was it safety? They pushed forward, the light growing brighter as they neared it. Then, suddenly, they reached the edge of the forest, and before them stood a large stone structure, its walls towering and imposing, barely visible in the moonlight. Aldrich paused, signaling for them to stop. "This is it," he said, his voice low. "We're safe now." Mia's legs felt like they might give way, but she kept her balance, looking up at the stone walls. The shelter was real. They had made it. But the danger wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Aldrich stepped forward, his hand resting on a large stone door, and pushed it open with ease. The door creaked, and Mia followed Aldrich and Adrian inside, the cold stone walls closing in around them. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of ancient wood and earth, and the faint glow of torches flickered on the walls. Mia let out a breath she hadn't realized she had been holding. They were safe, at least for now. But she knew that as long as Adrian was alive, the hunt would continue, and she would do whatever it took to keep him safe. Mia stood in the shelter, her breath steadying after the long flight through the forest. The stone walls of the ancient structure felt like a temporary relief, but even now, the heavy weight of what they had just escaped from seemed to linger in the air. The dim torchlight flickered against the walls, casting long shadows that danced with every movement. Adrian was standing beside her, his small hand still clutching hers, but now his grip was less frantic, more composed. He looked up at her, his face filled with a mix of exhaustion and curiosity. "What happens now?" he asked softly, his voice filled with a fragile hope. Mia glanced at him, her heart aching. She had promised to protect him, but she had no idea what they were walking into now, or how they would survive what was to come. "I don't know," she admitted, her voice tight with uncertainty. "But we'll stay together. We'll figure it out." Adrian nodded, though Mia could see the fear still lingering in his eyes. Aldrich, who had been moving around the shelter, stopped near them. His expression was unreadable, but there was something behind his gaze that Mia couldn't quite place. Perhaps regret, perhaps resolve. "You're safe for now," Aldrich said quietly. "But we can't stay here forever. The world we're hiding from is vast, and the people hunting you are relentless." Adrian's eyes grew wide, and he took a step closer to Aldrich. "Who are they? Why do they want me?" His voice was small, filled with the confusion and fear of a child who had just discovered that his entire life had been a lie. Aldrich took a deep breath, his eyes softening as he looked at his son. "They are the ancient vampire families," he explained. "They are powerful, and they believe that your power is the key to everything. Control over our world, over all the vampire clans. Your mother and I, we made sure you were hidden, protected, so that they couldn't use you. But now that you're awake, they will stop at nothing to find you." Adrian absorbed the words slowly, his mind still trying to piece together the reality of what had been thrust upon him. Mia could see it in his eyes, the flicker of understanding, the dawning realization of what he had become and what he was now a part of. Aldrich turned his attention back to Mia. "There is no easy way out of this," he said. "The world we are hiding from is one filled with power, politics, and deceit. But I need you to understand something, Mia. You're not just protecting him as a mother would. You are part of this now. Whether you like it or not, you are as much a part of this world as Adrian is." Mia's heart raced at his words. She had no idea what he meant by that, but she wasn't about to back down. She had already promised Adrian she would protect him, and that was what mattered. "I don't care about your world," Mia said, her voice steady despite the uncertainty that churned in her stomach. "I care about keeping him safe." Aldrich met her gaze, his expression softening, and for the first time, she saw a hint of something like gratitude in his eyes. "Good," he said, his voice low and solemn. "Because that's all that matters now. That's the fight we are in, protecting him, and making sure he doesn't fall into the hands of those who would use him for their own gain." The room fell silent. After his words, the weight of what they had just heard settling on Mia's shoulders. She had no idea what to expect from this strange, dangerous world, but one thing was clear. There would be no going back now. The danger would follow them, no matter where they went. The weight of the promise she had made to Adrian felt heavier with each passing second. But there was no choice. She couldn't let him down. Aldrich turned and started toward the back of the shelter, motioning for Mia and Adrian to follow. "We'll have to prepare," he said, his voice more businesslike now. "We need to move quickly, find a way to get him to safety. I have allies, but I'm not sure how many of them are still trustworthy. We'll need to move under the radar." Mia nodded, determined to follow his lead. She didn't know how much help she would be in this strange world, but she would learn. She would do whatever it took to protect Adrian. As they moved deeper into the shelter, Aldrich began to gather supplies. Maps, old books, and tools that Mia could barely recognize. She watched him work, her mind still reeling from everything he had said. Adrian stood quietly by her side, his eyes wide as he took in the strange surroundings. Mia knelt beside him, offering him a smile. "We're going to be okay," she whispered, though a part of her wasn't sure if that was true. Adrian nodded, his lips trembling as he returned the smile. "I'm scared," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. Mia's heart ached for him. He was just a boy. How could anyone ask this of him? She pulled him close, holding him tightly. I know you are, she said softly. But you're not alone. We'll face this together. They sat there for a moment in silence, the weight of their situation pressing down on them. But for the first time in what felt like forever, Mia felt a small spark of hope. They weren't alone. They still had each other. And as long as they did, they could face whatever came next. Vampire stories have long captivated audiences with their thrilling mix of suspense, danger, and supernatural elements. In this gripping tale, a young boy, the heir to a powerful vampire kingdom, finds himself waking from a long, cursed sleep. As the hunt for him begins, a brave woman promises to protect him at all costs, navigating a dark world full of intrigue and peril. As they fight to escape the forces that seek to control him, this vampire story explores themes of trust, survival, and the unbreakable bond formed in the face of overwhelming odds. With every step, the stakes grow higher, and the characters must face both the supernatural and the human enemies that threaten their lives. Filled with action, emotion, and the timeless allure of vampire stories, this narrative keeps you on the edge of your seat. The journey is only beginning, and the challenges they face will test their courage and their loyalty to each other. If you're a fan of vampire stories, this is a tale you won't want to miss, filled with twists, turns, and a fight for survival that will leave you wanting more.